Good evening and a warm welcome to all. I am Ridhil Mishra from the Corporate Communication team, and on behalf of Care Ratings, welcome you to our today's discussion on Indian pharma industry. We sincerely appreciate your time in joining us for this webinar. Our esteemed guest speakers for today are Mr. Ravi Kumar, Executive Director and CFO at Laurus Labs Limited, Mr. Mitanshu Shah, Senior Vice President Finance at Alembic Pharmaceuticals Limited, Mr. Ashutosh Dhawan, Group CFO, Mankind Pharma Limited. Dear sirs, thank you and welcome all. This session will be moderated by Mr. P. Bhagavath, Senior Director at Care Ratings. Dear participants, will commence the session with a presentation by D. Naveen Kumar, Associate Director, who is based out of our Hyderabad office, and Krunal Modi, Associate Director, who is based out of our Ahmedabad office. This will be followed by a panel discussion. We'll be having a Q&A session with the audience at the end of the discussion. In case of any queries, you are please requested to type in your questions in the panel provided. Now may I invite Naveen to begin with this presentation, please.
Krunal will be starting with the presentation.
Okay, Kunal, please. Thanks.
Thank you, Pradul. Good evening to all. My name is Krunal. So with me, Naveen will take you to the presentation. So these are the broad content of our presentation. We'll touch upon the overview of the global and Indian pharma, the factors driving the growth, challenges that is faced by the industry presently, strategies to overcome the import dependency, some key sectoral trends, and rating dispersion of care-rated pharma companies. Next, please. The key messages which we'll discuss during our presentation are: number one, the global pharma to grow to US $1.6 trillion by 2020-25. Within that, Indian pharma exports to grow to US $31 billion by the same period. We see a multiple growth driver to support the India's domestic pharma consumption. However, the growth of Indian pharma export is expected to outpace the growth of domestic consumption during next 2 to 3 years. India is also eyeing for a major opportunity out of the COVID vaccine. And the major theme of never before trend of China plus one would play an important role for the Indian pharma industry, both from import and exports point of view. Finally, credit metrics of Indian pharma company continues to remain healthy given the opportunity within the sector. We'll now start with the overview of the global pharma industry. Global pharma industry is dominated by the regulated market like US and Europe. As you can see, the global pharmaceutical market grew by around 4% during 2015 to 2020, and it is expected to grow at a CAGR of 6% over a period of 20 to 25. The growth would be driven by substantial rise in the aging population, easy and quicker access to quality healthcare, and company focusing on development of innovative product. Amongst the developed market, US presently contribute nearly 42% of the global pharma spending, followed by Europe. As you can see the pie chart presented on the left-hand side, US is expected to be the largest pharmaceutical market, with its share rising to 45% in the global pharma spending by 2025. You may please refer to the table presented on the left-hand side bottom of the slide. A top 5 global innovator companies enjoys more than 20% market share. And these companies are significantly bigger than the Indian pharma companies, which indicates the potential lies ahead with the Indian pharma companies. In nutshell, global pharma market to grow at a higher pace in the next 5 years compared to the historical average. Next, please. We'll now focus on the Indian pharma industry. The present size of the Indian pharma industry stands at around US $46 billion, of which more than 50% is being contributed by the exports. It is expected that Indian exports to remain higher compared to domestic consumption in a foreseeable future. As you can see from the first chart, Indian pharma export has witnessed a relatively steady growth on a YOY basis during last decade, except during 2017 and 18, where the growth remained weak. During the year 2017 and 18, the Indian pharma companies had faced regulatory headwinds from US FDA, apart from price erosion in the US market impacting the growth during these periods. Since then, the Indian pharma exports grew at a steady pace. It grew strongly at around 18% in the year 2021 over last year due to high demand of COVID drugs, apart from panic buying by some of the nations in wake of COVID disruption. Further, increasing supplier diversification away from China, with respect to bulk drug, has led to increased demand for API from India. As depicted in the chart below on the right-hand side, the exports of API, which remained between $3.6 to 3.9 billion during the year 2016 to 20, increased to $4.4 billion in the year 2021. Indian pharma exports are majorly driven by the exports to US, which accounts for around 30-35% of the total exports. More than 40% generic formulation being sold in the US market are manufactured in India. So what are the factors keeps the India ahead in the pharma exports? Low cost of manufacturing and availability of skilled manpower makes India one of the major players in the global pharma industry. We'll now move to the domestic consumption. Domestic pharma consumption grew at a CAGR of 6% during the past 5 years and stood at $21 billion in 2021. Now it is expected to grow at a faster pace of around 10% during the next 2 years, driven by increasing healthcare awareness, penetration of health insurance, growing lifestyle diseases, and increasing government spending under the Ayushman Bharat scheme. Especially post-COVID, the demand for preventive drugs like vitamins and minerals to grow faster than industry growth rate, which we'll see the export driver in our next slides. Similar to the domestic consumption, the exports of pharma products are also expected to rise rapidly. We expect India's pharma exports to grow at around 12% during the next 3 years till 2020-23, with major contribution coming from the generic formulations. Indian pharma companies are one of the cheapest producer of generic formulation globally. Changing world demography, along with the complex and specialty generic and biosimilar product, are expected to drive the export growth of the Indian pharma companies. The growth would also be supported by the patent expiry in the regulated market, which we'll discuss in our next slides. Patent expiry allows the generic drug to penetrate in the market. Over the next 5 to 6 years, till 2020-26, the patented product worth $236 billion goes off patent. This provides a large opportunity to Indian generic formulation companies. Many of the Indian pharma companies are already working to develop the generic version of the patented product to seize the upcoming opportunity. It is expected that Indian pharma companies may get around 5 to 6 billion US dollar opportunity due to patent expiry within next 4 to 5 years. So what are the factors required to grab this opportunity? Let's discuss this in our next slides. As you can see from the relative cost comparison table on the left hand side below the chart, India has a cost advantage in terms of production, R&D and clinical trial cost over the developed market. The cost of production in India is almost 50% cheaper than the developed market, and so as the other cost. These factors gives India an advantage over the developed countries. Apart from this, availability of the trained and specialized pharma workforce helps India to grow in the global market. With these factors in favor of India, generic formulation companies in India have been investing in their capabilities to develop complex and specialty drugs. As you can see that R&D expense of top 10 Indian pharmaceutical companies remained in the range of 6 to 8% of the net sales during past 5 years, and it is expected to remain in the range of 7.5 to 8% over next 2 to 3 years, as these companies are working with strong product pipeline. Majority of existing product pipeline are targeted toward the US market given the opportunity. It is also to be noted that of the total ANDA approvals granted by US FDA, India commands major share in product approvals. We will see the trends of ANDA approvals in our next slides. Here we can see the Indian pharma companies' dominance in the ANDA approvals. India's share of ANDA approvals in total ANDA approvals has increased to around 40% during the year 2020 and around 44% in the year 2021 from 36% in the year 2017. India has the distinctions of having the largest number of US FDA compliant plant outside the US. With the availability of the US FDA compliant infrastructure, it is expected that India will lead the patent cliff opportunity in the US. But return and risk go hand in hand. So let's discuss the risk involved in our next slides. With increasing presence in the developed market like US, the regulatory risk remains a critical monitorable. In past, India had faced regulatory challenges by US FDA. However, with the experience, Indian companies have improved upon the compliances. Despite rise in the number of US FDA audit, the instances of adverse observation by US FDA came down since 2018. Generally, US FDA classified the audit observation in form of official action initiated or warning letter or import alert. The number of such adverse observation came down over a period of last 5 years. Of the total warning letter, the number of warning letter received by relatively large companies having annual revenue of more than 500 crores has reduced to just 4 in the year 2020 compared to 10 in the year 2019. Moreover, large pharma companies are also hedging themselves through site transfer and filing the ANDA from 2 sites. Despite all this, greater scrutiny by the US FDA for compliance of GMP norms remains key risk for the Indian pharma, given its dependency on the US market. With this, I'll now hand over the presentation to my colleague Naveen. Over to you, Naveen.
Thank you, Krunal. In this slide, we will discuss about COVID vaccine opportunity available to Indian pharma companies. Before the thought of presenting that, the biggest vaccination campaign in history is underway. More than 3.7 billion doses have been administered across 179 countries till 11 p.m. yesterday. Now, I think most of us would be having a common question that when will the life return to normal? While the best vaccines are thought to be 95% effective, it takes a coordinated campaign to stop a pandemic. However, as per the industry experts, vaccinating about 70 to 85% of the population would enable the country return to normalcy. So in India, total number of vaccines administered till yesterday night was about 41 crores, 41.8 crores to say exactly, of the doses. Of which, fully vaccinated are about 8.7 crores, which accounts for about 6% of total population. And the current dose rate is about 25 to 30 lakhs of doses per day. Presently, Serum Institute and Bharat Biotech are the major players in Indian COVID vaccine market. Apart from these two, Zydus Cadila has already developed COVID vaccines and submitted their request to DCGA for approval. Other almost 78 companies are working with global innovator companies to manufacture the COVID vaccines in India. We believe that the COVID vaccine is a very large opportunity for Indian pharmaceutical companies with expected sales of about $8 to $9 billion during the next 2 to 3 years. Although currently the government is prioritizing domestic inoculations, there is likelihood that in FY22 we may see exports of COVID-19 vaccines. The export would be primarily to cater the demand from South American, Southeast Asian and African countries. With this assumption, it is expected that Indian pharma market may see a robust growth of about 20% during FY22 or FY21. Moreover, the incremental investment for the vaccine manufacturing is expected to remain about $1 to $1.5 billion, thereby providing good returns on the investments to these companies. With this, we'll move on to the next slide. The biggest challenge for the Indian pharmaceutical companies is its dependency on imports, particularly from the China for the bulk drug intermediates. During outbreak of COVID-19 in China, Indian pharma companies had faced a bit of supply disruption. Even prior to COVID-19, during FY18 and 19, Indian pharma industry has faced supply challenges from China due to stringent compliance of pollution control norms. During this period, Indian pharma industry witnessed a sharp rise in raw material prices. Since then, Indian pharmaceutical industry has realized the importance of backward integration for long-term sustainable growth. The country's total bulk drugs imports was about $3.8 billion, of which about 68% was from China in 2021. And it had been 68% for the last 2 to 3 years. Because the industry has been continuously facing either supply disruption or spiraling of prices of KSMs, intermediates, along with the ongoing tension across the border, places the industry in a vulnerable state. So in order to safeguard the national security, what steps the government and the industry is taking, we shall discuss in the next slide. So these are some of the strategies that are adopted by Indian pharma companies to reduce its dependency on China for raw material. First and foremost thing, which majority of the companies have done, is that they have gone for backward integration, at least for some of the critical KSMs. and has also started increasing the spend on R&D in order to produce cost and process efficient raw materials. Further, several global and domestic companies have sought for China plus one supplier base in order to diversify supplier base. This to some extent has also provided to advantages for Indian pharma companies, API companies, as certain 5 of the global orders were shifted from China to India. Apart from the industry efforts, even Government of India has recognized the need to support the industry to reduce its import dependency and has thus introduced several schemes and policies such as PLI and setting up of large API parks. Government of India has provided budgetary allocation of around 15,000 crores for PLI. Under PLI scheme for KSMs and APS, the government has already approved 46 applications with targets to incur 5,000 crores of capex. As we have seen that Indian pharma is striving to overcome the challenging and scenario primarily arising from the import dependency from China with various strategies. Now we shall discuss how they are planning to have a sustainable growth going forward. Considering the competitive environment, the Indian pharma companies venturing up the value chain from the commodity type Me-Too products to innovative R&D products including biosimilars, vaccines, and new chemical entities. Moving up in value chain provides sustainable revenue visibility and profitability to Indian pharma companies. As you move up in the value chain, there are limited number of players operating and thereby providing profitable growth. However, as you move up in value chain, it would require strong R&D capability and resources to fund such R&D. Manufacturing of such drugs can also pump up India's growth ambition. These drugs have better realizations, which can reduce the gap between India's ranking in volume and value. This has been achieved by addressing the right categories and the dosage forms and picking up the right markets across the world. However, NCEs and biosimilars are high risk, high return proposition, and company needs to fund such R&D through internal accruals or equity. One of the main constraints which Indian pharma companies face is that the banks and financial institutions generally do not fund such R&D costs. As mentioned by Krunal with respect to R&D, that the Indian pharma are preparing to spend about 7 to 7.5% on the R&D to build a strong ANDA and the product pipeline for sustained growth. In the subsequent slide, we shall be seeing what are the various methods that would be deriving the growth of the growth and profitability margins of the company going forward. This slide throws light on some of the stimulators which shall drive the revenue and profitability for the sector going ahead. Price erosion in US generic formulation market has started easing, and since 2019 with the favorable movement of exchange rate has been providing healthy opportunities to Indian pharma companies to grow in terms of the margin. Further, relatively inelastic demand of pharmaceutical products insulates Indian pharma players from turbulences caused due to economic downturn or due to prevailing pandemic. Further, relatively strong credit metrics of Indian pharma companies also provide room to focus on organic and inorganic growth. The major barrier for the Indian ambition to grow its share in a global pharma market is regulatory risk. Any adverse outcome of regulatory audit delays the launch of new products and increases the cost. Now that we have discussed how critical the investment in pharma plays a major role for its growth, let us see the kind of PE investments does the industry attracting in the next slide. Pharma sector has contributed about 6% of the total PE deals in terms of the sector has seen sizable increase in private equity deals both in terms of volume and value. Number of deals and aggregate value of those deals have more than doubled during CY 2020 with the continued beyonds during H1 CY 21. As pharma sector gets more and more attractive, we have presented certain major PE deals in our next slide. Here we can see that some of the top 10 global PE players such as KKR, Carlyle, International, Goldman Sachs, taking majority of stake in the pharma companies such as Aurobindo, JB Chemicals, Pyramil, RAK, and Biocon. So the list goes on. Although there are many PE deals which has taken place, but we have placed here only the major PE deals which are more than $50 million. So in this slide, we'll be seeing the aggregates of the top 100 listed entities. Structural changes in the pharma sector can also be caused from the financial performance of the top 100 companies. Over last 5 years, ended FY21, operating profitability of the industry remained in the range of 23 to 25%, and it is expected to remain healthy at similar level in future with positive bias. The debt coverage indicators too have remained very strong during last 5 years. Care Ratings believe that the Indian pharma companies should sustain its credit profile in future. Care Ratings has rated over 100 pharma companies, and we can see from the left side of the chart that about 75% of the portfolio companies are investment grade, that is with ratings with a triple B and above. This is one of the industry that remained insulated to a great extent from the crest and troughs of economic cycles and disruptions caused by the pandemic situation. With improvement in export business prospects leading to better credit risk profiles has augured the rating upgrades with a modified credit ratio, which is basically number of reaffirmations plus upgrades to number of reaffirmations plus downgrades, has increased from 1 during FY20 to 1.36 during FY21. A rating expects the credit risk profiles of its rated entities to remain stable with a steady expectation of growth and improved global prospects. With this, we'll move on to next slide. So in this slide, we shall be seeing the overall theme, wherein the presentation, which has started with if the Indian pharmaceutical industry is ready for next league of transformation. Here we can see that with wide opportunity for Indian pharma due to patent expirations, penetration of the health insurance, growing chronic diseases, pharma companies endeavoring to move up in the value chain towards NCE, biosimilars and specialty drugs combined with support from government. The strategies adopted by the firms, that is undertaking backward integration China plus one for supply diversification to reduce the import dependency, shall definitely provide healthy growth prospects to the sector. Further, the huge opportunity provided by COVID vaccine is expected to further boost the growth of the industry for next 2 to 3 years. CARE estimates that the industry to report a strong growth of about 20% during 2022 to reach the market size of about $55 billion during next year. Thus, with all the aforestated prospects, CARE affirms that yes, the Indian pharma is now ready for the next league of transformation. While we conclude the slides, I request our Senior Director Bhava sir to take over from here. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Krunal and Naveen, for that elaborate presentation. In this slide on the screen, you have clearly enumerated the factors that we feel would make the pharma sector ready for the next league of transformation. The large opportunity for the Indian pharma players due to drugs going off patent, the increasing R&D spend by the pharma players aspiring to move up the value chain, government support through PLI schemes to reduce the dependence on China, global pharma players looking for alternate supplies for APIs and KSMs or drug intermediates, and in our very own domestic market for increasing due to increasing health awareness and health insurance penetration, we are seeing a good there is a launching pad which has been created for the better growth for the pharma players. And now it's time for us to seek opinion from the experts in the field, our distinguished guest speakers. I have the honor of introducing our first guest today, Mr. V.V. Ravi Kumar, Executive Director and CFO, Laurus Labs Limited. Mr. Ravi Kumar is associated with Laurus Labs since 2006. He holds a master's degree in commerce from Andhra University and is a fellow member of the Institute of Cost Accountants of India. He possesses nearly 3 decades of experience in finance, IT, HR, and supply chain. He contributes significantly to formulating and executing core strategies for Laurus Labs. Prior to Laurus, Mr. Kumar has served as Vice President at Matrix Laboratories, which was later acquired by Milan Laboratories. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Ravi Kumar. And we have our next guest, Mr. Mitanshu Shah, Senior Vice President Finance at Alembic Pharmaceuticals Limited. Mr. Shah is associated with Alembic Pharmaceuticals since last 15 years. Mr. Shah holds Masters of Commerce degree, is a fellow member of Institute of Cost Accountants of India, and holds a management degree. He looks after the finance, accounts, management reporting, and investor relations at Alembic Pharma, apart from mergers and acquisitions and treasury functions. He has a total work experience of 25 years in corporate finance and management. Thanks for joining us today, Mr. Shah. Our next guest today, Mr. Ashutosh Dhawan, Group CFO at Mankind Pharma Limited. Mr. Dhawan is a chartered accountant and holds MBA degree from Delhi University. Mr. Dhawan has over 25 years of experience in strategic and operational finance in leadership roles with reputed organizations. Prior to Mankind Pharma, he has worked with DLF, Oriflame, HCL Technologies, and ST Microelectronics. Thank you, Mr. Dhawan, for joining us today. If I may come to Mr. Ravi Kumar first, my colleagues have presented the dependency on China for KSM and API, is a major threat facing Indian companies. Around 40% of our imports are from China, and the industry did see supply chain disruptions during the last year. Government is working out schemes like PLI to encourage import substitution. To what extent Indian companies will manage to reduce dependency on China over the next 3 years?
Yeah, thank you. Necessity is the mother of invention. So here, the blessing in disguise is when 4 years back, when there was a disruption at China in certain provinces because of the sudden stoppage of certain industrial parks because of the effluent or an environmental issues or any other issues. So the Indian organizations have been trying to mitigate some risk. We can't avoid it. Then Indian pharma companies have started looking at different provinces. Instead of earlier, no one looked at as China means China. So whether you have 2-3 sources from same province or not. Then people started looking at the different provinces. If there is an availability in India, people started approving the Indian vendors. But like it is, if you want to replace China continuously in the next 3 years' time, I don't think is possible. So what kind of an infrastructure we require, what kind of an investments we require to have in India is very big, very big. But the one buzzword is now we have to replace China. Maybe in PLI scheme, Government of India announced the PLI scheme. But if you look at the earlier scheme of export incentive, still the government has not paid the dues. The new scheme with a lot of strings attached. So how many companies will be selected out of the scheme? It is very premature at this juncture. Of course, PLA 1 scheme is already done, now the PLA 2. But the one interesting point from the Government of India's proposal of setting up an dedicated API industrial parks, that will be, if they can expedite, that will be very interesting. So whether the industry really require an incentive or can the industry survive an incentive is a big question. The industry can survive or any organization can survive on its own. Let's take in the one case, one X product where there is a PLI scheme or there is some additional incentive. When the China, they are very strong and then very quick in their decision making. They can do anything very drastically. So they will slash the price by 25% or 40%. Will the industry pays a premium to the Indian manufacturer by 10%, 20%? Answer is no. Immediately people will jump. And you also know that the pharma industry is very, very regulated industry. If you make an investment today, you will generate a revenue after 3 years or 4 years time, because if it is a greenfield expansion, because you need to have an regulatory approvals, you need to file DMFs or ANDAs, etc. It is a very long process time. It is not that today I set up a facility and then tomorrow I can get revenue out of developer market. So all these points we need to consider. But having said that, see, for example, even on our own case, we have reduced the import from China because one material they were increased exorbitantly. Then there is no choice. We try to find an Indian source. When we couldn't find, we started developing on our own. So now we are not procuring that material from China, but we thought China players may be slashing the prices of the particular product, but they didn't. So maybe they may also have enough demand for their facilities. So there is a possibility for the Indian pharma industry to move ahead and reduce China, but it requires a lot of capital investment. So every company has to commit maybe 1,000 crore plus. Then it is a possible for a replacement. But now whether it is an opportunity for India, yes, it is an opportunity for India. It is only matter of time how we need. If you recollect, maybe some of our panelists are from Ahmedabad. So once upon a time, actually, we were in fact, when I was joined in this industry, maybe 27 years back, so the Gujarat belt used to make a lot of intermediates. So when China came in, but all these companies have been closed. Now I think I'm personally banking more on the dedicated API parks. So that government can provide in common effluent, then water distribution, steam distribution along with the power. That makes a lot of commercial sense for the government as well as the industry. Thank you.
Oh, so that's a good message. All the stakeholders will have to come and put their act together to make this happen. And we should be in a position to reduce the dependency only if some of the stakeholders come together and give some additional thought to how do we go ahead. That's great. Now, if I may come to Mr. Mitanshu. Sir, as we understand, over USD 200 billion worth of drug sales are going off patent over the next 5 years. And we have seen in the presentation made by my colleagues, US is a large market and will continue to be so with a share of global market at 45% in 2025. How are the Indian pharma companies gearing up to the opportunities in the US market in light of the patent expiration?
Yeah, look, I mean, Indian companies have been at the forefront of, taking the bigger pie of the slice when it comes to the US business, actually. And that business is also extremely interesting. Why do I say so? Because, US formulation generics market is close to 128 billion market, actually, $1 billion market, and which is growing at around 7 to 8% in the value terms. Okay, and they have been promulgating this strategy of getting more and more drugs. So if you see today, out of 10 drugs, 9 drugs which are introduced in US are generics, actually. Okay, and so they are promoting the cheaper versions of the drug. I mean, when we see this, we know that, as you are presented in your slides, India has a distinct advantage when it comes to the cost. So material, you had presented some 50%, clinicals we were at 10%, and so if we see all these benefits which are to us, I mean, India is on the cusp of making a major breakthrough when it comes to not only generics but also the specialty. I mean, so because we have been little ahead of the curve when it comes to biosimilars, for that matter, or the complex generics, actually, 505(b)(2)s, basically, all of that. So because the technology resides, and we have very good technologists sitting in this country who have helped put us in the mainframe. Having said that, the everything which is good does come with pinch of a salt and the issues, actually. We have so many players now, actually, which was not the case earlier. Even for first to file or first to market, we used to have 5-7 players, and today you will have not less than 10 players, actually, which would eventually mean that it is a smaller pie for every player who is playing there. There is a extreme cutthroat competition, and which is also seen very clearly from very large generic companies performances. Take the case of the very large generic players like Mylan or Teva, Sun, DRLs of the world, actually. You would have seen that they have really not grown that business to a size, because people have been just coming and so matured generics are losing the sheen, actually. Let's put it that way. They are becoming more and more commoditized, actually, and that's why there's a huge margin pressure. When you've been talking about this 25-30% kind of EBITDA margins, I don't see them getting sustained unless and until companies actually move the curve. And when I say move the curve, is get into some of these more interesting areas which we just spoke about, actually. And that's where most of the so even the capital allocation strategy that has been now biased towards more complex things, or people getting into NCs, I mean new chemical entities, actually. We have seen a lot of companies, very large, look for that matter, very large generic companies. I mean they have not been able to generate generate the kind of alpha which they otherwise thought 5 years back, or getting into their boardrooms and talking about 10-year growth plan. None of them have, most of them have failed on the US generics curve actually. So what I want to summarize in gist is that while there is a fantastic opportunity, considering that $240 billion worth of goods are actually or products are getting off patent, close to 50 billion a year actually, average it out here and there, fantastic. But look at the players. I mean, today everybody wants to have that pie. Everybody has learned the tricks of the trade. Everybody knows how to get over the regulatory hurdles. Everybody has the technology. So for you to be distinct, for you to be different, you would have to do those differentiated things which will put you in a lesser competitive trajectory actually. And that's where most of the pharma companies are now working, or most of the boards or strategic intent of the board is to work towards those kind of goals and objectives. But yes, having said that, we are very much averse of the kind of downfall that you see in the cyclical kind of businesses actually. So pharma is a more stable business, more robust business. So if you keep some of some of the key factors or ingredients in your house very strong, you have a excellent manufacturing setup, you have a beautiful regulatory team, you have a very efficient supply chain, and you have a great front end to work with. I think these are all the ingredients for a very successful US business to be in, and that will kind of give you a momentum and growth. For something which is above our industry growth rate, you will have to do something which is a little different, and that is what I spoke actually. So I wish good luck to all the players in this field, and looking forward to a very healthy competition going ahead.
Clearly, yeah, it indeed is a message that more and more competitors coming in, and the Indian players are surely targeting this opportunity and working towards relentlessly, even through diversification, or getting into different products and getting into the value chain. Sure. Let me ask Mr. Ashutosh on some of the challenges in hand right now, and this is regarding the escalating input cost. Over the last 1 year, prices of APIs and KSMs and the drug intermediaries being imported have increased significantly due to the supply chain disruptions and higher freight costs. On the other hand, some of the medicines are under price control in the domestic market. How is the industry able to absorb the pressure on the margins?
Sure. Thanks. At the outset, a very good afternoon to everyone, and I hope and wish each one of you good health. So before coming to this point, I would like to underscore whatever Ravi Kumar has mentioned, that if we have to be dominant and well integrated into the global supply chain on the API front, there has to be a collaborated effort among the industry, the regulator, as well as academia as well, because it's going to be a interplay of innovation, manufacturing efficiency coupled up with the infrastructure. So these three, then we can be into a dominant position in the times to come. So coming back to that, last 12 to 18 months, they have been disruptive for the pharma industry, and the companies have faced disruption in terms of API issues, manufacturing continuity issues, changing business model, work from home to work from the field, modern trade. As you rightly mentioned, that there is a pressure on the pricing, and the pricing is regulated. For the scheduled drug, the price increase is linked to WPI. For the non-scheduled drug, there is a limit, a cap of 10% in a gap of 12 months period. And API and KSM, they form a major cost component in the cost of the product. It's around, I would say, 2/3 the cost of the product is for the APIs and all. So companies have taken multiple steps to mitigate the price increase effect. The specific cost saving measures have been adopted by the companies, such as technology absorption for imparting training, CMEs through webinar, etc. So this has given a potential saving on the business promotional expenses. In addition to that, manufacturing efficiency projects, they have also been undertaken, such as yield improvement program, rationalizing on the packaging cost, and optimizing on the utilities, etc., looking at the wastages, reducing the sample costs, or optimizing on the breakage expiry. So these are some of the cost saving measures which the companies have taken. In addition to that, there has been a natural saving as well due to COVID. The cost structures have reset. There has been a saving on the travel cost, in the admin overhead, because of the customer interaction cost has decreased because of the lockdowns, etc. And thirdly, I would say wherever there has been an opportunity and headroom availability, the opportunistic price increase has been taken. And if we summarize as a sum total of all these steps, the companies have been able to maintain their margins, and in some cases have been able to improve the margins by 100 to 200 basis points. So these are some of the action points which the companies have taken. Yeah. So I will pause here.
I mean, yeah, sure, that's true. I mean, the cost reduction has been one of the major mantras for many of the companies during the pandemic, and all due to uncertainties being faced by different companies. And yeah, I think many of the companies have gone through the cost reduction measures, and probably that is going to sustain. Mr. Ravi Kumar, if I can, pose a question to you. While we did discuss that import dependency on China is a threat, in recent times, one is seeing China is also giving us an opportunity. Global pharma majors are looking at diversifying their supply base from China to other countries, more being referred to as China plus one strategy. And India stands a chance of being an alternate supplier. What kind of opportunity lies ahead for Indian pharma companies on taking some of the share away from China from the global pharma majors?
Yes, this is a very good point actually. When all this 3-4 years time, many big pharma companies realize that they can't depend only on China. Of course, when they want to depend China plus another one country, whether it's in India or maybe some part of in Europe or maybe in any other developed country, some of the European countries also, they are trying to pitch that okay, we can be an other source other than China. But India has, because of the cost competition, India has a lot of chances. But these chances, when we need to have a free capacity, or when someone comes to you and then whether you can able to deliver them on time or etc. is the question mark. That is one opportunity India got. Second opportunity, in fact, China also is given. China is also a very big market. So there is a chance that 6 years. So it's I feel 5-year time, people will strengthen their strengths. They'll not bother about their weaknesses. So like that, actually, some of the products probably we may specialize in India, in some of the Indian companies, they'll export across the globe. So similarly, if suppose one Chinese company got an expertise, they will export to various. There is a good opportunity for in India. We have to wait and see how Indian companies are getting ready to take that opportunity in the coming years.
That is true. I mean, the global pharma companies are looking at alternate sources, and India being one of the cost competitive player probably stands a chance of getting some pie.
Can I compliment this by 2 lines actually? This
Sure,
question.
sure.
Some of my experiences there actually. So I feel that while I definitely China does a great job. I mean, when it comes to knowledge science, something where you have like something like custom synthesis to be done and things like that. I mean, which is just beyond producing at a volume. I mean, I think that's where Indians are really well actually. And going ahead, you will see that the premium would be on something where you talk about the custom synthesis and stuff like that, purely on the chemistry side I am talking about actually. And that's where the large part of the value will reside actually. And that's where we have some real good startups, some very established companies. I mean, needless to say, somebody like DV's lab or someone, they would do fabulously well actually. And when we talk to some of the counterparts in Europe, as Ravi just said, I mean or the countries in regulated market space, they'll say that that's where they are really getting excited about. Then only the pure play traditional APIs actually, and that's where India will definitely score much bigger.
Sure, sure. And Mr. Shah, you just made a point earlier that the competition is there in the US market, which is a bigger market. But earlier we were seeing both things, price erosion happening and the competition being there. But do you see the price erosion now has probably stalled, and although the competition will be there, price erosion is probably stalled and it will not go down further? What is your view?
No, I mean we have. See, price erosion is an effect of many things actually. Okay, and we have to see what are the parameters which affect the price erosion. One of the biggest issues that we see today, and I was looking at the statistics, was that the inventory levels in US are at the highest levels of last 15 years actually. Now if this is true, people are will go and offload those inventory and try to, because the biggest issue with pharmaceuticals is shelf life, right? I mean, and when you have such a huge massive inventories in US, what you will obviously see is that people will go and try to kind of salvage these inventories, and that's where I see. So that is on a short-term curve that I see you will have a pricing pressure coming in. On a more sustainable basis, I would say that pricing or price erosion is something that all the companies would have to live with. I mean, it's like living with an evil actually, and you cannot do away with it. The reason I'm saying this, and this will happen, and this will only get accentuated as we go further, is because of the competition that you have, and this competition is not going down. The reason that you will see this again getting accentuated over next 1 year is because FDA has not been able to come and audit your plants. Now there was a distinction when FDA used to come very regularly, and then there was a distinction between a good guys and a bad guys. I mean, I'm nobody to make a judgment, FDA makes a judgment, but so you naturally had some competition taken out of the equation because they will simply eliminate. Now that is not happening. They just sit there and they have been just renewing the approvals for 2 years and things like that, which has kind of loosened the belt on the manufacturers. They feel that, oh, I mean, we are there in the game. I mean, and as well kind of sell and sell, make volumes and just sell. I mean, so unless we do go back to that normalcy where FDA comes, there is a very distinct, detailed audits happening, weeding out the good from the bad kind of things. So at this point in time, the sum and substance is that the supply is outpacing the demand, and whenever you have a situation like that, you will always have a pressure on the prices actually. Look at the other factor is China. So China was big time only into the APIs and intermediates, key intermediates, KSMs and stuff like that. They are putting up very large facilities on formulations as well actually, and they are very quickly learning that curve. You will have that competition also coming in very soon. Some of the Eastern European countries have started working, and if you see the cost structures of these Eastern European countries vis-a-vis India, they are absolutely, if not at an advantage, at least at the level of India actually. So now, and yes, they would obviously save on the freight cost because India from US 8,000 miles, and they are just halfway distance. So that again adds a big plus to them. So if you see, price erosion is something that you will have to live with actually, and anything which is like if you get a 3 years of life on a generics, you should consider yourself to be very fortunate. And that's where companies, to avoid this price erosion, would have to keep investing on the R&D, and they will have to keep churning the new products. They have to keep the filing momentum on. And that's where, so you will have some products which will just go out of the competition or just go out of your basket because you don't just find any value in them. And then that would be substituted through, the new offerings. And that's where, we were talking about that patent cliff actually. So it is a continuous space where you have to keep on investing and, get the incremental benefits out of your R&D spend. What people have started doing now is, started looking at some of the alternate markets apart from US, which will give you, if not better, at least the equivalent amount of habitats actually. And that's where, countries like some of the European countries or Canada or Australia, South Africa, Brazil have come into, extreme focus, and Indian companies have started either putting their leg through some form of M&A or direct entry into these countries, because you at the end of the day feel that as well have the pie properly distributed of the revenue share, so that you are insulated from one big jolt you may get from one geography. So this is all being discussed at the board level at the pharma companies today at this point in time, but nothing is taking away the price erosion story out of the US dynamics. That's gonna stay.
That's a very interesting point you made. The East European countries are equivalent to being cost effectiveness to India. That's a very interesting point actually. Mr. Ashutosh, the pharma players have been creating niche segments as far as chronic therapeutic segments are concerned. The pandemic has thrown a new set of challenges. According to you, which are the main chronic therapeutic segments that would be performing better than the industry for the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, sure. So if we look at the chronic segments, so they can be broadly classified into two buckets. One is the life-threatening chronic diseases, addressing to that aspect. Second is the non-life-threatening chronic diseases. So if we talk about the life-threatening chronic diseases, which are typically cardiovascular, diabetic, neuropsychiatry, and we Indians are prone to these type of diseases, both genetically as well as because of our sedentary lifestyle. And this segment is expected to grow at a comparatively faster pace. Neuropsychiatry is also growing at a fast pace because there has been an increase in the depression cases, hypertension cases because of the COVID, extended pressure and all those things. If we talk about the growth rate in the cardiac therapy has grown somewhere around 13% in FY21 as compared to IPM growth of 4.3%. So, and the neuro CNS has also shown a growth of 10%. So this is one area which can be the growth driver. If we talk about the non-life-threatening diseases, so they are typically arthritis, gastrics, GI, ulcer, ophthalm, asthma and all, where there is a tendency to delay the treatment. And because of this tendency, it results in the lower volume growth and sometimes the loss of sale as well. And within this segment, if we look at respiratory, so respiratory segment has shown a degrowth of 8% or so, which is primarily because of masking and better hygiene and the reduced pollution, which has resulted in the lower asthma cases. If we look at the future, I would say the market penetration of the chronic segment is, I would say, a tip of the iceberg, because currently the chronic segment is majorly concentrated in the urban areas, and there is a big potential in the rural area, which is 75% of the population base. And this population base is largely remains undiagnosed. As you rightly mentioned, there has been an increased awareness because of pandemic and the emergence of new models such as telemedicine. So this will result in a higher degree of diagnosis of the chronic diseases, and which will result in the higher prescription generation and ultimately resulting into the higher volume growth in the times to come. So telemedicine is something, if it picks up, and which is very highly likely it is going to pick up, because it was not banned earlier per se, but there were no guidelines. But the guidelines have been issued by the government in March 20, and it is ramping up quite fast. And with this, it's definitely going to grow, and which will certainly going to benefit the chronic segment. So these are some of the points which I wanted to highlight to address that. This could be the potential, the growth driver. They will be performing better than the industry in the next 2 to 3 years. Yeah.
Great.
So I
Thanks
will
a lot,
pause here.
Ashutosh. Sure. Thanks a lot, Ashutosh. I think it's time for the audience who's waiting anxiously with some questions. I would we can start the Q&A session, and I would request Naveen to scan the questions, and if there are some questions which are directed to our distinguished guests, you can put it across.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. So this question is to Mr. Shah. This question is especially with respect to NCE kind of segment. The question is, do we see more pharma companies getting into NCE segment, and where do we expect the funding to come from, given the approval process is so long?
Yeah, I mean, today, if you look, I mean, everybody has put, if they have not put their entire leg into it, somebody has put a toe, somebody has put a bit of a, so, I mean, because see, the risk rewards are extremely, I mean, they have been just unbelievable. Let's put it that way. I mean, so companies who have seen the successes out there know that it's infinity value that you derive out of the investments that you do if you become successful. Actually, large companies, they have seen that, very large companies have seen that they don't get growth on their existing existing portfolio, and that's where they have moved on to, and they have deep pockets, they can do that. Then there are some very niche individuals who understand the chemistry well, who understand the formulation development well, who understand the disease profile well. They have got the funding from either the hedge funds or the venture capitalists or the private equity big time. And this process is split into two, and I'm aware of the times, that's why this answer would have been in 2 hours actually, so I'll try to do it in 3 minutes. What happens is that you have to do only, so there is phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. You need funding only for proof of concept, which will just part of your first part actually. Once you have your proof of concept done, you are able to showcase that here is the molecule which I am trying to develop, which would have this sort of efficacy. There is nothing like this, I mean, ever developed. You would find people to fund your phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, all of that together. And that's where you see most of the out licensing deals done by the smaller companies. So people will go and do their phase 1 or even pre-phase 1 actually, and then right from clinicals to the final filing is all done by the very large companies actually. So that is how this can be done. Yes, you have a very promising candidate, people will come and fund you anyways, I mean.
Sir, considering the paucity of the time, I'm going for the last question from the participants. So this question is for Ravi Kumar, sir. How well is India poised for the development of biologics and biosimilars?
I think the one of the greatest advantage for in India is, so the reverse engineering, India has done a great job. So even biologics and biosimilars also. Now I think we have a good future in India actually. Now, how many companies have moved forward? Yes, there are few companies have already been there. They also have a tie-up with the multinational companies. They are not doing on their own, but there is a good potential here. But of course, when compared to China and India, chemistry side, India has done its best, but the biology side, China has done its best. Now, I think India is gearing up. So the definition of biology in the early days has been what we call interpreted in a different ways. But now actually I think it is shaping up. Definitely it will have a very good future for it.
Thank you, sir.
Over to Mridul.
Yeah, so that was the last question I'm taking up for the day. Thank you, Naveen. Thank you, Krunal, Mr. Bhagavath. And thank you again to our guest speakers. It was a privilege hosting you, Mr. Shah, Mr. Dhawan, Mr. Ravi Kumar. And thank you again to all the participants for taking your time out and being a part of this Care Ratings webinar. We hope the discussion was insightful and look forward to your participation in future also. In case of any queries, comments, or feedback and suggestion, you are most welcome to write in the comment box, which will be coming no sooner the webinar ends. Thank you and goodbye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.